Pride is one of the most powerful forces in human nature. It can build empires, create legacies, and push people to achieve greatness. But it can also be the very thing that keeps people locked inside their own emotional prison. When it comes to relationships, whether romantic, professional, or personal, invulnerability is something most people fear more than failure itself. From a young age, we are conditioned to believe that showing emotion is a sign of weakness. Society tells us that being too emotional is dangerous, that it exposes us to hurt, that it makes us look desperate, needy, or weak. So we learn to suppress it. We learn to bury what we feel beneath layers of logic, distractions, and most of all, ego. Ego is a protector. It's the voice in your head that tells you if you stay silent, you can't get hurt. It convinces you that avoiding rejection is more important than chasing what you want. It makes you believe that reaching out first means losing power. But here's the truth. Ego is a liar. It tricks you into thinking silence is strength when in reality it's just fear in disguise. Think about the people in your life, friends, family members, or past relationships. How many times have things fallen apart? Not because there was no love, not because there was no care, but simply because neither person was willing to break through the pride. It's a tragedy that happens every single day. Someone is thinking about you right now. They want to reach out. They want to say something. They want to reconnect, but their ego won't let them. And guess what? You might be doing the same thing. Fear of rejection is one of the deepest fears we have as human beings. It's wired into our survival instinct. Thousands of years ago, being rejected by a group could mean death. If you were cast out of your tribe, you wouldn't survive. That fear is still inside us today. It makes us hesitate before sending that message. It makes us second guess before making that call. It makes us overanalyze every little interaction. But here's where ego and fear become the real enemy. They don't just stop us from taking action. They rewrite reality. They make us tell ourselves stories that aren't true. Instead of believing that someone is thinking about us but struggling to say it, we convince ourselves they don't care. Instead of realizing that our pride is keeping us stuck, we tell ourselves we're just waiting for the right moment. We let our minds build narratives that justify inaction, and in doing so, we rob ourselves of opportunities that could change everything. Think about all the times you've wanted to say something to someone but didn't. Maybe it was telling someone you love them. Maybe it was apologizing for something you regret. Maybe it was asking for a second chance or even just checking in on someone you miss, but you didn't. And instead of taking action, you waited. You told yourself if they care, they'll reach out. And they told themselves the exact same thing. This is the silent battle happening everywhere. Two people, both thinking about each other, both wanting to reach out, but both letting pride win. And what happens? Days turn into weeks. Weeks turn into months. Months turn into years. And then one day you look back and realize how much time was wasted, how much love was lost, how many connections were broken, all because pride had a stronger grip than truth. Now imagine a different reality. Imagine what happens when pride doesn't win. When someone chooses courage over comfort. When someone decides that being honest is more important than being safe. When someone realizes that risking rejection is better than living with regret. In that reality, relationships are healed, business partnerships are saved, friendships are rekindled, love is given a second chance, lives are changed, simply because one person refused to let pride dictate their actions. The sad truth is, most people never reach that point. They hold on to their ego like it's a shield, not realizing it's actually a cage. They keep waiting for the perfect moment, not understanding that the perfect moment will never come. They let fear of rejection dictate their choices, not realizing that rejection is far less painful than the regret of never knowing what could have been. So if pride is such a powerful force, how do you break free from it? By recognizing it for what it is. You have to understand that your ego is not protecting you, it's limiting you. You have to acknowledge that fear of rejection is not a good enough reason to stay silent. You have to make a decision. Will you let pride keep you stuck, or will you take control of your own life? This isn't just about relationships, it's about everything. How many dreams go unfulfilled because someone is too proud to ask for help? How many careers stay stagnant because someone is too afraid to admit they don't have all the answers? How many families fall apart because no one is willing to be the first to say, I'm sorry? Pride doesn't just affect one part of your life, it affects everything. And the only way to break free from it is to make a choice. A choice to stop waiting, a choice to stop assuming, a choice to stop letting ego decide your future. Because at the end of the day, pride won't comfort you when you're alone. Pride won't bring back lost time. Pride won't give you the answers you need. Only action can do that. And right now, someone is thinking about you. They might be struggling, they might be missing you, they might be waiting for a sign. And the question you have to ask yourself is this: are you going to let pride win, or are you going to take the first step? Silence is one of the most misunderstood forms of communication. People assume that when someone doesn't reach out, it means they don't care. That if they're not calling, if they're not texting, if they're not making an effort to see you, it must mean you're not on their mind. But that's not always true. In fact, more often than not, the silence isn't empty. It's full of thoughts, emotions, and unspoken words that are trapped beneath the surface. People struggle in silence more than we realize. They battle their own insecurities, their own doubts, their own fears. They rehearse conversations in their head 100 times, wondering how things would go if they just had the courage to say what's on their mind. They think about the right words, the right timing, the right way to express themselves, but then they hesitate. They freeze, they overanalyze, and instead of taking action, they do nothing. Why? Because uncertainty is terrifying. No one wants to be the one who looks foolish. No one wants to be the one who reaches out only to be ignored. No one wants to put themselves in a position where they might feel unwanted, rejected, or misunderstood. So they convince themselves it's safer to say nothing at all. They choose the comfort of silence over the risk of vulnerability, even when that silence is torturing them inside. This is the silent struggle that happens every day. Two people thinking about each other, wondering about each other, wishing they could say something, but both too afraid to take that step. So instead of connection, there's distance. Instead of clarity, there's confusion. Instead of healing, there's lingering pain. And the worst part, no one ever really talks about this struggle. We assume that if someone wanted to reach out, they would. That if someone cared, they'd make the effort. That if someone was thinking about us, they wouldn't be able to stay away. But human emotion isn't that simple. The truth is, some of the people who care the most are the ones who stay silent the longest. Some of the people who love the hardest are the ones who struggle the most with expressing it. It's not because they don't want to, it's because they don't know how. Maybe they've been hurt before. Maybe they've been burned by rejection in the past, and the idea of experiencing that pain again is too much to bear. Maybe they're afraid of looking weak, of appearing desperate, of being judged for still caring when they're supposed to have moved on. Or maybe they're just waiting for a sign, waiting for an opening, waiting for the right words to come to them in a moment of courage that never actually arrive. And so they stay stuck. They check their phone wanting to send a message but don't. They replay memories wondering if you still think about them too but never ask. They convince themselves that if they just wait a little longer, the uncertainty will disappear on its own, but it doesn't. Because silence doesn't bring closure, it creates more questions. Now think about how many times you've done this yourself. How many times you've wanted to reach out to someone but stopped yourself at the last second? How many times you've typed out a message, stared at it, and then deleted it? How many times you've told yourself if they wanted to talk, they'd talk, while deep down you were thinking the same thing about you? This is what makes the silent struggle so powerful. It's not just happening to one person, it's happening on both sides. Both people are waiting for the other to break the silence. Both are feeling the pull, but resisting it. because their mind is feeding them every excuse to stay still. And the longer the silence lasts, the harder it becomes to break. At first, it's just hesitation. Then it becomes stubbornness. Then it turns into pride. Then before you even realize it, enough time has passed that reaching out feels impossible. You start telling yourself, it's been too long, it would be weird now. And just like that, something that could have been mended, something that could have been healed, is lost, not because the feelings weren't there, but because no one had the courage to act on them. But here's what's important to understand. Silence does not mean indifference. Just because someone isn't saying anything doesn't mean they don't feel it. Just because they haven't reached out doesn't mean they haven't wanted to. Just because they're not showing it doesn't mean they're not struggling with it. People battle with their emotions more than they ever let on. Some people hide behind silence because they don't know how to process what they're feeling. Others hide behind it because they think that's what they're supposed to do. They assume that silence is a sign of strength, that pretending not to care is the best way to regain control. They think if I ignore this long enough, it'll go away. But deep down, they know the truth. It never really does. Because the thoughts are still there. The feelings still creep in at night. The questions still linger in the back of their mind. And no matter how much time passes, that little voice still whispers, what if? What if they feel the same way but are just as afraid to say it? What if this whole time the silence hasn't been a sign of moving on, but a sign of struggling to let go? What if everything they've convinced themselves about this situation has been wrong? The hardest thing about the silent struggle is that it never resolves itself on its own. It just sits there in the background of your life waiting for someone to be strong enough to break it. Everything in life, every breakthrough, every transformation, every success begins with a single step. Yet, when it comes to relationships, emotions, and communication, taking that step is often the hardest thing to do. People hesitate, they overthink, they wait for the right moment. But deep down they know that moment may never come. Why? Because taking the first step requires vulnerability. It requires courage. It requires stepping into the unknown without any guarantee of what's on the other side. And for most people that is terrifying. In relationships, whether romantic, professional, or personal, there's always that moment where someone has to break the silence. Make the first move and take the risk. Maybe it's reaching out after weeks, months, or even years of no contact. Maybe it's admitting feelings that have been buried beneath layers of pride and fear. Maybe it's simply asking a question that could change everything. Are we okay? But here's where people get stuck. Instead of taking that first step, they create reasons not to. They tell themselves if they wanted to talk, they would reach out. They convince themselves it's been too long. It's better to just leave it. They let their mind play out worst-case scenarios, imagining rejection, awkwardness, or indifference. And so they do nothing. They sit with their emotions, waiting for the other person to make the move, waiting for fate to step in, waiting for a sign that may never come. And while they wait, the distance grows. The silence becomes normal. The opportunity to reconnect slowly fades away, not because the feelings disappeared, but because no one had the courage to act on them. But here's the truth. The person who takes the first step is the one who holds the power to change everything. The world doesn't reward those who wait. It rewards those who take action. The people who create the deepest connections, who build the strongest relationships, who live without regret, they're the ones who refuse to let fear dictate their decisions. They're the ones who say, I don't care if I look foolish. I don't care if I have to be the one who reaches out first. I care about the truth more than I care about my pride. And that's what this is really about. It's not about who texts first, who calls first, who swallows their pride and says what needs to be said. It's about having the courage to chase clarity over comfort. Because comfort will keep you stuck. It will keep you in a cycle of waiting, wondering, and wishing things were different without ever doing anything to change them. But clarity, Clarity sets you free. Clarity tells you exactly where you stand. Maybe the person you're thinking about has been waiting for you to make the move. Maybe they've been struggling with the same thoughts, the same emotions, the same hesitation. Maybe they want to reach out just as much as you do, but they're afraid. And the moment you break the silence, you give them permission to do the same. Or maybe the answer you get isn't what you hoped for. Maybe you realize they've moved on, that they're not in the same place as you, that the relationship won't be what it once was. But even then, clarity is still a gift. Because at least you know, at least you're not trapped in a loop of unanswered questions. At least you can move forward instead of being stuck in the past. The irony is, most people who hesitate to take the first step do so because they're afraid of looking weak. They think reaching out first makes them seem desperate. They think admitting they care makes them lose power. They think vulnerability is something to be avoided at all costs. But the truth? Vulnerability is strength. It takes strength to admit you care. It takes strength to say, I don't want to lose this connection. It takes strength to risk rejection, embarrassment, or discomfort in the pursuit of something real. The people who are truly weak, they're the ones who let fear control them. They're the ones who choose their ego over connection. They're the ones who sit in silence, pretending they don't care, all while hoping deep down that someone else will be brave enough to do what they couldn't. And if you think about it, some of the greatest moments in life, some of the most powerful relationships, the most life-changing opportunities happened because someone had the courage to take the first step. Think about a job you wanted but were afraid to apply for until one day you took the leap. Think about a friendship that deepened because one person was willing to be honest. Think about a love story that started because someone ignored their fear and said, hey, I really like you. Everything begins with action. So if there's someone on your mind right now, if there's a conversation you've been avoiding, if there's a connection you missed but have been too afraid to rekindle, ask yourself this: what are you really waiting for? Are you waiting for them to make the move? Are you waiting for a sign from the universe? Are you waiting for the fear to disappear before you act? Because if you are, you're going to be waiting forever. Fear never fully disappears. The perfect moment will never arrive. The only thing that changes is whether or not you decide to move despite the fear. And here's the thing, you don't have to write a long emotional message. You don't have to have the perfect words. You don't have to know exactly what's going to happen. All you have to do is take the first step. Maybe that means a simple, hey, how have you been? Maybe that means admitting I've been thinking about you. Maybe that means picking up the phone and making the call you've been avoiding. But whatever it is, just do it. Because no matter what happens, one thing is certain. Taking the first step will always give you more answers than staying silent ever will. Regret is one of the heaviest burdens a person can carry. It lingers in the back of your mind, creeping into quiet moments, whispering thoughts of what if and if only. It steals your peace, makes you question your past decisions, and keeps you stuck in an endless loop of wondering what could have been different if only you had acted when you had the chance. And one of the biggest causes of regret, not saying what needed to be said when you had the opportunity. So many people live with the weight of unsaid words, the apology they never gave, the love they never expressed, the second chance they never asked for, the person they let walk away without a fight. And they tell themselves they had their reasons. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the assumption that there would always be another chance, another moment, another opportunity. But life doesn't work that way. Opportunities don't last forever. People don't wait around indefinitely. Life keeps moving forward, with or without you. And if you don't take action when the moment presents itself, you might find yourself looking back one day wishing you had done things differently, but realizing it's too late. Regret is cruel because it doesn't hit you all at once. It sneaks up on you. It hides behind distractions, behind busyness, behind the illusion that everything is fine. But then one day, out of nowhere, it strikes. Maybe it happens when you hear a song that reminds you of them. Maybe it's when you pass by a place where you once shared a memory. Maybe it's when you see their name pop up somewhere unexpectedly. Or maybe it's when you realize after too much time has passed that reaching out now would feel impossible. And at that moment, the pain of not knowing becomes far worse than the fear of rejection ever could have been. Because at least if you had tried, if you had said something, if you had taken action, you would have had an answer. Even if it wasn't the answer you wanted, at least you wouldn't be haunted by the unknown. But now you'll never know. And that's what hurts the most. People like to tell themselves that time heals everything, that if they just wait long enough, the feelings will fade, the thoughts will disappear, the regret will dissolve. But that's not how it works. Time doesn't heal what you refuse to confront. It doesn't erase emotions that were never resolved. It doesn't close doors that were left open. Time only magnifies regret, because the longer you wait, the more impossible it feels to go back and make things right. The more you convince yourself that reaching out now would be pointless. The more you let your ego, your fear, your overthinking keep you in a state of paralysis. But the truth is, it's never too late until it is. And you don't want to wait until you reach the point where all you have left is the story of what you didn't do. Think about how many moments in life could have been different if someone had just spoken up. Think about how many relationships were lost, not because there was no love, but because neither person was willing to take the first step. Think about how many people have walked away from each other, both of them wanting to stay, but neither being able to say the words that would have changed everything. Regret isn't just about losing someone, it's about losing yourself in the process. Because every time you let fear or pride stop you from saying what's in your heart, you're not just shutting someone else out, you're shutting yourself down. You're training yourself to believe that it's safer to stay silent, to hold back, to suppress your emotions rather than express them. And the more you do this, the harder it becomes to live fully, openly, and without fear. The people who live with the least regret are not the ones who never make mistakes. They're not the ones who never experience heartbreak, rejection, or disappointment. They're the ones who chose courage over comfort. They're the ones who said, I don't want to wake up one day and wonder what could have been. They're the ones who decided that even if things didn't go the way they hoped, they would rather know than spend a lifetime guessing. They're the ones who understood that temporary discomfort is always better than permanent regret. And if you're reading this right now, thinking about someone you miss, thinking about words left unsaid, thinking about an opportunity you're afraid to take, then ask yourself this: do you want to live with the regret of never knowing? Because that's the real question. Not what if they don't feel the same way, not what if I embarrass myself, not what if I get hurt. The real question is, can you live with the regret of not trying? And if the answer is no, then you already know what you need to do.